Claire had never planned to start over at 37, but life had its own ways of rewriting stories. Her divorce had been quiet, civil, and completely heartbreaking. After it ended, she packed up everything that felt heavy with memories and moved to a quiet neighborhood just outside. Seattle, a peaceful street where people smiled at each other from across their lawns but rarely asked too many questions. That's exactly what she wanted. Peace, privacy, and a chance to breathe again. Her new house was small but warm white walls, maple floors, and a porch that faced the street. Every morning, sunlight poured through her windows, touching the corners of her life that had once been dim. For the first time in months, she felt the world slow down. Across the street lived Daniel Brooks. He was the kind of man you noticed even when you didn't want to. Early 40s, tall, calm, and effortlessly kind. He lived with his wife Erin and their teenage son, who was away most of the year at a private school. Daniel was an engineer, the kind of man who fixed things quietly: fences, sprinklers, and sometimes hearts he didn't mean to touch. The first time they spoke was over something simple. Claire was struggling with her garden hose. It had cracked and was spraying water in every direction. She laughed at herself, drenched and annoyed, when Daniel walked over from his driveway. "Need a hand?" he asked, holding his coffee mug, smiling the kind of smile that reached his eyes. She hesitated, then nodded. "Please, before I flood my yard." He crouched down, checked the connection, and fixed it in seconds. "There, just needed a tighter seal," he said, standing up. Claire smiled. "You make it look too easy," he chuckled. "Comes with too many Saturday chores." 'Twas nothing, a brief encounter between neighbors. But that small moment stayed with her longer than it should have. That night, when she saw his porch light flicker on, she found herself looking out her window longer than she wanted to admit. Days turned into weeks, and their interactions grew naturally. Sometimes it was a wave in the morning, sometimes a short chat when they both picked up mail at the same time. He was always polite, never too familiar, yet something in his tone, his kindness, felt different. When his wife was out of town for work, Daniel often stayed busy with yard work or fixing things around the house. One afternoon, Claire brought him a glass of lemonade. "You look like you could use a break," she said. He smiled, taking it. "You just saved me." They sat on his porch steps and talked for nearly an hour about work, music, and how life sometimes takes turns you never expect. It felt effortless, like talking to someone who already knew her rhythm. From that day on, their friendship found quiet ways to grow. They exchanged small favors. He helped her with her mailbox when it jammed. She baked cookies for his son when he visited home. But beneath every word, something subtle pulsed, a warmth neither of them dared to name. One rainy evening, Claire was reading by her window when she noticed Daniel's lights go out. The whole street shimmered with rain, but his house was completely dark. A few minutes later, there was a knock on her door. Daniel stood there, soaked, umbrella dripping, smiling apologetically. "Power's out on my side." "You still have lights? Mind if I wait it out here?" She hesitated for just a moment before stepping aside. "Of course. Come in before you freeze." They sat in the living room, candles flickering. The sound of rain filled the quiet between them. It wasn't awkward, it was calm. Heavy in a way that made every small sound matter. "You ever notice," Daniel said softly, "how quiet everything gets when the lights go out?" Claire nodded. "Sometimes quiet is the loudest thing." He looked at her then, really looked. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. They talked for hours. About life, mistakes, regrets, love that fades but never fully dies. He told her about his marriage, how it wasn't broken, just empty. Erin was kind but distant, and he had stopped trying to reach her years ago. Claire listened, feeling the weight of every word. She understood too well what it meant to live beside someone and still feel alone. When the rain finally stopped, neither of them moved. He stood to leave, but his hand brushed hers as he reached for his jacket. It was a small touch, nothing more, but her heart raced. They both froze, then slowly stepped apart, as if afraid the moment might break something they couldn't fix. "Good night." "Claire," he said, his voice low. "Good night," she whispered. That night, she lay awake listening to the soft hum of rain. Something inside her had changed. The next morning, Claire promised herself she'd keep distance. She told herself it was just friendship, that she was imagining the tension between them. But every time she saw him, that promise unraveled a little more. One afternoon, he'd waved at her from across the street, his smile tired but warm. She smiled back, pretending it meant nothing. But when she saw Aaron's car pull out of the driveway the next day, a strange ache twisted in her chest. Not jealousy exactly, but longing. She didn't want to feel that way. Yet she couldn't help it. The pull between them was slow, quiet, and dangerous, the kind of thing that didn't need words to exist. A few weeks later, Daniel hosted a small neighborhood barbecue. Claire was nervous to go, but didn't want to seem rude. She wore a soft blue dress and brought a plate of brownies. The evening was full of laughter, music, and the scent of grilled food. Daniel greeted her at the door, his eyes lighting up. "You came," he said, sounding genuinely happy. "Wouldn't miss it." She replied. Inside, Aaron was friendly but distracted, checking her phone every few minutes, stepping away to take calls. Claire chatted with other neighbors, but her eyes found Daniel again and again. Once, while helping him carry dishes into the kitchen, their hands brushed. Neither said a word, but the air shifted. It was a small moment, yet it left her trembling inside. When she left that night, Daniel walked her to the edge of her driveway. "Thanks for coming," he said softly. "Thank you for inviting me." She replied. For a long second, they just stood there, silence heavy with everything they couldn't say. Then she turned and walked away, her heart pounding. That night, she sat by her window again. The street was dark except for the faint glow of Daniel's porch light. She knew it was wrong to feel what she felt. But emotions have their own gravity, pulling you in even when you fight against them. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from Daniel. "Can't sleep. Are you awake?" Her fingers hovered over the screen before she replied. "Yes." Another message came quickly. "I keep thinking about earlier, about the barbecue, about everything." She stared at the words, her heart pounding louder than the rain outside. She typed slowly. "Me too." No more words followed, but they didn't need any. They both knew the line had already blurred. The next morning, she tried to act normal. She went for a walk, bought groceries, cleaned the kitchen, all the small things that made life look ordinary. But nothing felt ordinary anymore. Every glance across the street, every wave, every smile carried a secret weight. It wasn't about wanting more. It was about feeling seen, understood, alive again. And yet, somewhere deep inside, Claire knew that stories like this didn't end neatly. They burned quietly, consuming everything in their path. Still, she couldn't stay away. When she saw Daniel that evening, standing by his mailbox, their eyes met. He smiled faintly, a question in his gaze. She didn't speak. She didn't have to, because in that look, that quiet exchange, everything had already been said. For the next few days, Claire tried to keep her distance. She told herself that what happened, or almost happened, didn't mean anything. It was just emotion tangled with loneliness. She kept busy with work, volunteered at the library, and even joined a weekend yoga class. But no matter what she did, her mind always drifted back to Daniel. Every time she walked past her window, she caught glimpses of him, fixing the fence, mowing the lawn, helping Aaron load the car. He looked the same as always, calm and polite. But sometimes, when their eyes met for a brief moment across the street, she could see it, the same hesitation, the same longing he tried to hide. One evening, as she was bringing groceries inside, she heard his voice behind her. "Need help with those?" She turned, startled, and there he was, smiling faintly, hands in his pockets. "Oh, it's fine," she said quickly. "Just a few bags." But he stepped forward anyway, taking 2 from her arms. "It's no trouble." Inside, the air felt heavier. They unpacked the groceries together, moving around the small kitchen in silence. Their hands brushed when they reached for the same bag and both froze. Daniel was the first to speak. "Claire, about that night. I shouldn't have come over. I think I crossed a line." She looked at him, her heart thudding. "You didn't. Nothing happened." He gave a short, almost sad smile. "Sometimes it's not what happens. It's what you wish would." The words hung between them. Claire wanted to deny it, to say he was wrong, but she couldn't, because deep down, she knew he was right. He left soon after, thanking her for the lemonade she hadn't even offered. When the door closed behind him, she stood there, staring at the quiet kitchen, realizing that her life had become something she didn't understand anymore. That night, rain returned, the kind of steady drizzle that made the whole neighborhood glow under streetlights. Claire sat by her window again, watching drops slide down the glass. Across the street, Daniel's porch light was on, but the house looked still. Her phone buzzed. "You awake?" It was him. She hesitated before typing back, "Yes." Then came another message. "Can we talk?" She knew she should say no. She knew this was how people got hurt. But instead, she typed, "Okay." Minutes later, there was a soft knock on her door. When she opened it, Daniel stood there, damp from the rain, his expression uncertain. "Sorry," he said quietly. "I just needed to clear my head." She nodded. "Come in." They sat on the couch, silence stretching between them like a tight wire. Finally, he spoke. "I don't know what this is, Claire. I haven't felt anything like this in years. But it's not right." "I know," she whispered. He looked down. "Aaron and we've been more like roommates than a couple for a long time. I thought it would get better, but it never did. I don't want to hurt anyone, especially not you." Claire's voice was soft. "You're not hurting me, Daniel. But this, whatever it is, hurts already because it can't go anywhere." He nodded slowly, staring at the floor. "You're right." They sat in silence again, the sound of rain filling the room. When he finally stood to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Good night, Claire." "Good night," she said. But as the door closed, both of them knew it wasn't the end. The next few weeks were a storm of mixed emotions. They tried to act normal, friendly, but distant. Yet fate seemed determined to push them together. When Aaron traveled for work again, Daniel asked if Claire could feed his cat for a few days. She agreed, telling herself it was harmless. The first evening she went over, the house felt oddly quiet. She filled the cat's bowl, checked the mail, and turned to leave. But something drew her to the living room. A family photo sat on the shelf. Daniel, Aaron, and their son, smiling under the summer sun. They looked perfect. But Claire could see it now, the distance in Daniel's eyes, even then. She sighed, whispering to herself, "What am I doing?" Just then, the door opened. Daniel had come home early. "Oh, hey," he said, surprised but smiling. "Didn't expect you here yet." "Was just leaving," she said quickly. But he stepped forward, gentle and calm. "It's fine. Stay a minute. I just made coffee." She hesitated, then nodded. They sat together again, cups in hand, pretending everything was normal. But when their fingers brushed as he handed her a mug, something inside her gave way. "Daniel," she began, but couldn't finish. He looked at her, his voice low. "I've tried to stop thinking about you. I can't." She swallowed hard. "We can't do this, I know." Yet neither moved. It wasn't about desire. It was about everything they'd both lost. The laughter, the closeness, the feeling of being truly seen. For years, they'd both lived half-lives pretending to be fine. But sitting there in that quiet house, the truth was impossible to ignore. They didn't touch, didn't cross that line. But the air was full of everything they wanted and couldn't have. When Claire finally stood, tears blurred her vision. "This has to stop," she said softly. Daniel nodded, his jaw tight. "You're right." She walked out without looking back, though every step felt heavier than the last. For days, she avoided him. She changed her walking route, closed her curtains earlier, and kept herself busy with work. She told herself she was fine, but the truth was she missed him. Then one evening, as she was leaving the library, she saw him standing outside, waiting in the rain. "Daniel," she said, startled. "What are you doing here?" He looked exhausted. "I needed to see you. Just to talk." "Daniel, please, I'm not asking for anything." he interrupted. I don't know how to forget you. The sincerity in his voice broke her. She wanted to turn away to protect what little stability she had left. But when he reached out, just barely touching her hand, she didn't pull back. They stood under the rain, not speaking, just breathing the same air to people caught between right and wrong, love and loneliness. Finally, she whispered, "You should go home." He nodded slowly, stepping back. "Good night, Claire. Good night," she said, watching him walk away through the rain. Weeks passed. The distance between them grew again, but the ache didn't fade. Then one evening, she found an envelope slipped under her door. No name, no message, just a note inside that said, "Thank you for seeing me." Her chest tightened. It was his handwriting that night. She looked out her window again. His house was dark, but she could see the faint glow of his study lamp. For the first time, she didn't wave or wait. She simply closed the curtain and whispered, "Goodbye." But life has a way of surprising even those who try their hardest to move on. A few months later, Claire received an invitation, a neighborhood meeting to plan a community garden. She didn't want to go, but decided it was time to face things. When she arrived, she saw him there, standing near the coffee table, looking just as startled to see her. They talked briefly, polite, distant, safe. But when the meeting ended, he walked her to her car. "Claire," he said softly, "I wanted to thank you again for everything. Aaron and we're trying to work things out." She smiled, a little sadly. "I'm glad, Daniel. You deserve to be happy." He hesitated. "You too." Then he turned and walked away. As she drove home, she felt tears slip down her cheeks, not of regret, but of release. For the first time, she knew she could let go, that night. As the street grew quiet and the lights dimmed, Claire sat by her window one last time. Across the street, Daniel's porch light glowed softly, not as a signal this time, but as a goodbye. She whispered to herself, sometimes love isn't meant to last. It's meant to remind us that we're still alive. And with that, she stood, turned off her lamp, and let the darkness settle gently around her. 3 months had passed since Claire last saw Daniel. The seasons had changed, the air was cooler, the leaves turning shades of gold and amber. Her small house looked different now, lighter somehow, as if it had finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. She had stopped waiting for messages that wouldn't come, stopped glancing across the street when she heard a car door. Daniel and Aaron still lived there, but they kept to themselves. The porch light that once flickered late into the night now turned off early. It was as if both of them were trying to rebuild quietly, piece by piece. Claire spent her evenings differently now. She painted again, something she hadn't done since college. She filled her living room with small canvases of sunsets, windows, and city lights. She started jogging in the mornings, waving at the mailman, greeting neighbors she used to avoid. Her life wasn't exciting, but it was finally her own. Yet, some nights, when the wind brushed against her windows and the world fell silent, she still thought of him. Not with longing, but with a quiet ache, like a scar that no longer hurts, but never truly disappears. One Saturday morning, she was watering her plants when she saw Aaron standing outside. Aaron gave a small wave, then crossed the street. "Hi, Claire," she said, her tone polite but warm. "Hey, Aaron," Claire replied, forcing a smile. She hadn't spoken to her properly in months. "I just wanted to thank you," Aaron said, "for everything. For helping with the cat, for being a good neighbor. I know things were strange for a while." Claire's heart skipped a beat. "It's okay. I understand." Aaron nodded. "Daniel and I went through a rough patch, but we're in counseling now. It's helping. He's been different lately, softer." "I'm glad to hear that," Claire said sincerely. Aaron smiled. "You know, sometimes people come into your life just to remind you what's missing. Then they leave and you have to fill that space yourself." The words hit Claire deeper than she expected. She realized Aaron wasn't blaming her. She was just acknowledging what everyone already knew without saying. They talked a bit longer about the neighborhood, the weather, the new coffee shop that had opened downtown. When Aaron left, Claire felt something she hadn't felt in months: peace. Later that week, Claire got a new project at work, designing a small art exhibit for the town hall. It was a big deal for her, and for the first time in years, she felt proud of what she was doing. Her days were filled with color, light, and purpose. But life has a way of circling back to unfinished stories. One evening, after a long day of setting up the exhibit, Claire stopped at a small diner for dinner. She was halfway through her coffee when she heard a familiar voice. "Claire." She turned. Daniel stood there, looking surprised but glad. His hair was slightly longer, his face more tired but somehow calmer. "Daniel," she said softly. He smiled awkwardly. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Same," she said, setting her cup down. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Sure." He sat across from her, the silence between them thick but not uncomfortable. "You look good," he said. "Happier." "Doing better," she replied. "Work's been keeping me busy. I'm helping with an art show downtown." "That sounds like you," he said with a small grin. "And you?" she asked gently. He took a breath. "Erin and I are still working through things. It's not perfect, but we're trying. I think we'll make it." "Glad," she said. And she meant it. He looked at her, studying her expression. "You don't hate me, do you?" She smiled faintly. "No, Daniel, I don't hate you. I think for a while I hated myself for how much I cared. But now I just want us both to be okay." He nodded, looking relieved. "You are good for me, Claire, even if it wasn't forever." Her throat tightened. "You were good for me, too." They sat there for a while longer, talking about small things, books, work, the new neighbors on the corner. When they finally said goodbye, there were no promises, no glances full of regret. Just to people who had once needed each other, now learning to stand on their own. Weeks turned into months again. The town's art exhibit opened, and Claire's work received praise. People came up to her, complimenting the warmth in her paintings, the emotion they carried. What they didn't know was that every brushstroke held a piece of her past. Her favorite piece was one. She almost didn't show a quiet painting of two houses across the street from each other at dusk, one with its porch light glowing faintly. It wasn't about love or loss. It was about distance, understanding, and peace. After the exhibit ended, Claire took that painting home. She hung it above her fireplace, where the light from the window could touch it every morning. A few months later, she was invited to a community event at the park. She went, not expecting much, just an afternoon of music and food stalls. As she walked through the crowd, she spotted Daniel again, this time with Erin and their son. He saw her too. For a moment, their eyes met. He gave a small nod, not the kind of greeting that asked for a conversation, but one that said, "Thank you for everything." She smiled back, then turned to watch the band playing on the small stage. The wind carried the sound of laughter, the smell of popcorn, the warmth of early summer. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the urge to look back. That night, back home, Claire sat by her window again. The street was quiet, just like before, but everything had changed. She wasn't the same woman who used to wait for someone else's light to flicker on. She had her own now. She thought about all the moments that had brought her here. The rain, the coffee, the silences that spoke more than words ever could. She realized love wasn't always meant to be a lifelong story. Sometimes it was just a chapter one that changed you, taught you, and left you better than before. She whispered softly, as if speaking to the night itself, "Thank you, Daniel." Then she stood, turned off her lamp, and walked away from the window. The moonlight glowed faintly on her paintings, and for the first time in years, she felt complete. Months later, a letter arrived in her mailbox. No return address, just her name written neatly across the front. Inside was a small note that read, "Your painting from the exhibit? I saw it. It was beautiful. You found peace, and so did I. Wishing you everything good." It wasn't signed, but she didn't need to guess. She smiled, folded the note carefully, and tucked it inside her journal. Life moved forward quietly after that. Claire kept painting, kept living, and kept believing that love, even when it ends, leaves something behind, a lesson, a memory. A softer heart. And though the porch light across the street no longer meant what it once did, every time it flickered at dusk, she couldn't help but smile, because it reminded her that once, for a moment in time, she and Daniel had seen each other when the rest of the world wasn't looking. And that was enough.